It tells me we're live and we're on air. I don't know if we really are. Hello, good evening, bienvenue, and welcome to Drone Stuff this week. I think it's the 18th of October, isn't it? Someone can correct me. First order of business, we've got to work out what the market is that we're going to be making predictions for this week. So let's turn on our great wheel and then let's spin the wheel. If only I can find it. There it is. So we'll be making decisions on, drone delivery. Now that's a good one. That's a popular one, isn't it? So drone delivery. In fact, I think we've witnessed various people rolling out vans for that, haven't we? But we'll move forward with that, and let's roll the dice. I do know. Oh. It's going to be a big number this week. 5, and let's put that one outside. Loretta, have you got some numbers so it's not all the dice first?
Okay, that's what are we talking about? How much it's going to be? When it's going to be?
I don't think we can make a date out of these numbers. I think it's got to be the value of the market for the next year.
In the next year?
Yeah.
All right. Oh, in the next year, it's not going to be anything. Zero.
Zero.
In the next year.
Yeah. Then I've got a number 4, and then I've got a number 3 and a 3, a 5, a 2 and a 3. Patrick, you got a number?
Oh God! How about a 9?
A 9. And Jan, have you got a number?
I've got a 511.
Oh my word! Oh, well, Loretta was a person with big numbers. That is the forecast for drone deliveries for the forthcoming year. There it is. And I had to Google how to do the commas on all the numbers because I really don't know. Anyway, let's get into some other stuff today. Patrick, has anything caught your attention this week?
I don't know. There's always too much going on, but I do been talking to a lot of people about some of the op-eds that I've written, and people are really interested in figuring out how to make this a business that hits some of those forecast numbers, not only that we're generating, but other forecasts.
Yeah, obviously our ones are the real ones.
Well, exactly. It's very scientific. It's probably more scientific than most. There's lots of, I would say, pent up, and it's not demand, it's definitely potential. And folks are trying to figure out how they're going to go out there and get these markets, realizing that it might be a little bit harder than just buying the equipment and waiting by the phone or the website for, as far as business development is concerned. But are we going to get into delivery? Because I'd love to.
Oh, yeah, we can get into delivery,
my words of wisdom on delivery. But I don't want to hog it up. If you want to ask around.
No. You go first. If you've got something to say on delivery, you go ahead with delivery. Deliver it, Patrick. Deliver it.
Deliver the delivery. Well, I just think that I really think that these big companies like the Googles and Amazons. I mean, really, if they want to do this. We're starting to see numbers, like real numbers here. I was talking to a gentleman this morning. He says, well, I said, I don't even think they have a tool or a toe in the drone aviation pool.
Hi, here's Rory joining us from, sorry, I'm just breaking in. Rory's joining us from Australia. Looks like he's on a bicycle. That's fantastic.
See?
Good morning, Rory.
Good evening, everybody.
Upwardly mobile. So my thing with it is, I think that really if the big companies want to get into the delivery thing, look at what 3DR was able to accomplish with $100 million. I think somebody needs to either go to Google or Bezos and say, hey, crack open the checkbook. You really want to do this? It's going to cost $500-600 million. We're going to hire the right people to design the aircraft that can do the job, and then what we're going to do is we're going to develop something that's certifiable, both airframe and software. And then we're going to go hire some lobbyists that work for the airline industry. And we're going to move in and we're going to show people we're serious. And then we're going to go do this thing. That's what
Well,
I think. The level of commitment is needed.
Well, I guess so, but I don't know if you picked up that in Cambridge, some school children got a tour of the Amazon facility there, which was pretty cool, I thought.
Well, it's
But
probably the
what
only
was more
people
interesting?
you're going to get to buy their business plan right now, or their model. It's the kids.
Well, I thought it was nice for the school kids, but what I thought was perhaps more interesting was you're quite noisy there, Rory. You're getting off your bike.
Sorry, I'll go on mute. Apologies.
All right, then, no worries. Can just pop back in when you intend to say. The children that got to tour that lab saw the Mark 24 model of their delivery drone, which I thought was quite amusing. They made the reporter dumb down the photo, make it lower res to not reveal any secrets, whilst we can see the 3DR radio and perhaps a pixel, the parachute on the top. And the fact is the Mark 24, we knew from the ENRA register last year that we knew of at least 5 of those. So there's got to be some more of those out there. They've got to be further down the line with that development than that. Otherwise, they've surely got to be in trouble. Google's got a much nicer looking machine than that at the moment. And I suppose, actually, that can spin me quite nicely, unless you've got any more to say on that, Patrick or Loretta, or anyone really.
Well, what I was wondering, and it's really just something I've been wondering about, is the Part 107 rules allow for intrastate delivery. So it still has to be line of sight if you don't get a waiver. But I would think that there would be businesses that would be looking into whether or not they could do line of sight delivery. So it can't be Amazon because it would be considered transportation for the package to have traveled by rail or car or airplane. So you couldn't take an Amazon package and do the last, mile by drone under the rules. But I think there's a lot of businesses that could start experimenting with it. And I think that would be kind of a fun thing to do.
For sure. Now, Tian, today you were witness to an aircraft not flying for the first time, but the first time in public, and you were the public, all one of you. So maybe you can just go through what happened there, what you saw, and how long it flew for, and that had some potential to be a delivery drone.
We'll see. Basically what happened, Duran from Steady Drone, they've started a new business called ALTI UAS, where they've been developing for the past year or so a VTOL. It's a mix, hybrid petrol electric, where it has a petrol motor for the forward flight and with a single engine, single prop. And then they've got basically a quadcopter type setup going for the vertical takeoff and landing. Let me pop that onto the screen quick.
So it's an SLT, isn't it? It's a separate.
It's basically. Let me just try and get that. I think you're broadcasting your image.
No, not at the moment. All right, go through some numbers with it.
But basically, I'm trying to get the photos up, but otherwise it'll be on the site and in SUA's guide soon. I wouldn't say delivery drone specifically. I think it's more for the sensors, for more industrial level clients where, say mines and oil and gas, where they've got limited space to do ground runs with aircraft, but they do need the extra range, extra distance that the thing can go. I think this is, Duran and I were discussing it today, and it's almost like you could call it a niche just below like the Scan Eagle, where a Scan Eagle or something might be way too expensive for the client, but they also can't really use an in-house built thing, almost hobby grade. They need that in between that big system and something built yourself. And I think this might just fill that niche. But delivery drone, maybe maybe future versions of it. Yeah, there it is. I see you've put it up on the screen now. Yeah, maybe future versions, maybe some bigger versions in future coming along might work for delivery purposes. But I don't think.
I'm going to call Rory in a minute. Here's Rory. Go ahead, Rory.
That's actually Carbonics, isn't it? The group that are making that drone?
No, that's ALTI US. Carbonics do the manufacturing. They literally the manufacturer, but they're not actually the designer. And we had a long discussion about that today. The Carbonics was contracted to manufacture it, basically. The design and the integration is done elsewhere.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, those Carbonics are based here in Sydney. They're really good blokes, and getting some runs internationally on board. Yeah.
So, how long did it fly for, Tian?
Today, I mean, I got there. It was already in the air for about 10 or 15 minutes by the time I got there this morning. And I watched it fly for basically 6 hours. So, and it was quite impressive. Where after a while we were just sitting and talking about other things and just, is it still flying? Yeah. So it just kept going, and it was quite a bit of wind around, which was this aircraft you can see from the photos. It doesn't have much of a side profile. It doesn't actually have a rudder, and that also helps with preventing any gusts or any crosswinds from really hurting its performance. Did a bit of weather vaning, but overall, no, it wasn't the easiest flight conditions, and it handled it pretty well from what I could see from the ground. So. And then the transitions and the takeoffs and the landings after the endurance flight, put in a little bit more fuel, did a few short circuits, full transitions from takeoff to landing, and all went pretty smoothly. I was quite impressed, actually. There were no moments where you're like, ooh, that's a bit dodgy. It just.
What are the dimensions?
Sorry, say again, Loretta.
What are the dimensions? The size?
I think it's a 2-meter wingspan. So it's quite a big, and it also clips off. So you'll see later when we bring out the video and photos of it. The wings actually clip off, and it's a relatively easy process. I was actually quite surprised how quickly it could clip off. But yeah, it's 2-meter wingspan. I'm trying to find the photos. I'm trying to get the photos on the screen for you so you can see the size as well. Anyway, yeah.
Is it using the Pixel?
Sorry?
Yes, it is.
Using the Pixel? Okay.
Yeah, it is. It is using the Pixel.
Okay, great.
But their own version, Rory. They've had their own boards made. You saw them, and it's going to have its own dedicated GCS as well.
Right, that's great.
So,
and what about sensors? What are we shipping with?
What's it shipping with sensor-wise, Tian?
I'll have to look at the specs. I wrote a lot of the stuff down, didn't catch all the smaller details. But I know they're going to provide several packages where it'll be custom for a client, depending on what payload they need. They'll either ship it without a payload or with whatever else, other sensors. I can't remember the name now off my top of my head.
What sort of money was it going for?
Say again?
What sort of money?
I think it's around the $60,000 mark. So it's quite a bit cheaper than a $3 million Scan Eagle. So I think it's trying to fill a gap there, I think.
So, Rory, if we jump back...
Sorry, is that it's got sort of the really long-range communication links, and it's the sort of supporting services that make that so expensive, but rather than the airframe itself. But and I feel like actually a lot of the industry sort of needs to keep thinking a lot about the usability of all these things, not just the performance. But that's really interesting.
But if you could fly a platform, I mean, what sort of area do you reckon a platform flying for 6 hours at, what, about 70 or 80 Ks an hour could map, Rory? It must be a huge area.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be looking probably 15 or 20 square kilometres
Yeah.
off the top of my head. So it's a lot of mapping. I mean, you're gonna struggle to find a cloud processing solution or even a desktop processing solution that'll do a good job with 6 hours of continuous flight, just because it's probably going to be flying with a nice 42 megapixel Sony A7R, and that's a lot of photos.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I mean, some of these systems over there, we're going to do this and that, and really, there's a bottleneck there. Not that it's not great that the system can do it. It's just kind of interesting that to look at it from that perspective, Rory.
Yeah, I think it's just chicken and an egg, like in so many regards at the moment. One thing's got to advance to encourage everything else to advance, but absolutely nothing's happening sort of simultaneously, I don't think.
Are there wonderful cycle paths in Sydney like there are in Melbourne? Are you busy trundling down one?
I actually am, except I'm holding my bike. I'm not riding my bike. I want to make sure I can unmute at a minute's notice.
That's one thing I enjoyed about living in Melbourne was the cycle paths. They really were amazing. That's a little bit off topic, isn't it? Now, all these people with their 107s and their platforms that can fly forever, they're arriving on the scene fast, and Jonathan, who claims to be working, but I'm not sure we believe him, has shared some statistics today. And I don't know, Loretta, have you had time to have a look at those?
I did look at them, and I was really amazed at the fact that so many manned aircraft pilots were getting their 107, and was kind of wondering what was behind that. And I actually asked Jonathan, and he thought it was private pilots justifying their hobby to their spouses. But it'll be interesting to see if they think that they can get a piece of the UAS action or what. But I mean, that's pretty amazing. Almost double, or more than double the number that have taken the test.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Patrick. After you. No, after you, Patrick.
I was going to say too. I think one of the other thing with the 107 test, there's a lot of people that, let's say, the drone people that haven't taken the test, who are kind of afraid of taking the test and thinking that it's going to be really hard. And as I wrote my op-ed, I thought it was pretty easy myself. I don't think that the FAA could have made it any easier. But I think a lot of people don't come from aviation and they have concerns and trepidations about taking this test. So I wonder if that's...
But are you a pilot, Patrick?
I'm not a pilot, but, talking to people, they're like, oh, this is hard. There's a lot of hard stuff on there. I didn't think it was that hard. I thought it was the minimum that the FAA could really put together for people to... I equate it to, you do driver education. Hey, you got to learn the rules of the road. You can make a right after a stop, yada, yada, yada. Same deal with, how to read the charts, how the pattern works around the airport, things like that. I thought it was kind of the minimum. What did you think? You took it, right, Lorena? What did you think?
Yeah, I took it, and I think if I didn't have my background in aviation, I would have thought it was a challenging test. I thought a lot of the questions were things that you really would never know if you weren't in aviation. And I could see why people would be concerned about taking the test if they didn't study properly. A lot of people have been out of school for years, and there was a fair amount of information. Now, could you have passed the test? That's possible. That people could have gotten 70s, which is passing grade. I thought it was a good test. I mean, I don't know that it was particularly helpful for flying a drone, but
Well, the no practical was kind of interesting, but I talked to people I've quizzed some folks, and they said, "Hey, I don't know anything about aviation. I read the study guide. I took the test. I didn't pass by much, but I passed." You know. So I don't know. But I do think there are still some people. The other thing too, being to some of the Silicon Valley VC things, a lot of people now are saying like their drone is a robot, it's autonomous. I'm not really flying it; it flies itself, which I think is another cop out because it's still pre-programmed. But whatever. We'll see how this thing shakes out.
Yeah, but you've still got to be overseeing the system, and you've still got to have a knowledge of the airspace that autonomous system is operating in. It's not operating in a vacuum or by.
No, you're preaching to the choir on that one. I mean, you're still the RPIC. They're not really. That's a big conversation that needs to be had in the whole drone communities. Everyone's moved on to AI. My thing's autonomous, and we've kind of talked about that before. The version, or what is the real definition of autonomy? But even still, you programmed it, you launched it, and you're flying. I mean, you're still responsible. It's not the programming, but that might be another deal. Like we remember through the last few years, we had, I'm not really commercial. I'm a hobbyist. I don't get directly paid for. You remember all of that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's coming
now
out again.
Rules. So if you don't fit within 101, then you're 107. So
exactly, I totally agree with you on that one. You're either it's cut and dry. You're either or.
The one I'm seeing coming up a lot now is I'm below 100 feet, therefore it's illegal. I don't know where this one's started coming from, but I'm seeing a lot of people saying, no, I didn't go above 100 feet, don't need anything, everything's good, I'm good to go. So yeah, I guess so those sort of people dodging the test or wanting to operate at the extremes are always going to exist, regardless of systems being in place to sort it out. But I think it's a very good system, and I'm glad it's in place, and it's very interesting watching people scrabble to try and make money. I don't know if Rory's able to stop pushing his bicycle and unmute for a second, but are you seeing an increase? Don't crash, Rory. Are you seeing an increase in users from the States?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a really interesting time at the moment because we're seeing increased usage from the US, and I think probably not just increased usage, but increased usage where the people coming online are sort of dropping us messages saying, "Hi, look, I'm brand new to this. How can I make money off drones?" And I think that's a pretty concerning sentence because it's not just about turning up with a fancy and pressing some buttons or watching a thing fly. So that's interesting. But the second thing is that it's happening in Australia, probably in an even bigger, or rather an even more loose regulatory space. So what we're seeing here is that the regulator has gone and deregulated drones lighter than 2 kilos for anyone to use commercially, provided you obey the standard flying safe flight operation, so under 400 foot, daytime, visual line of sight, etc. But the only piece that you've got to do to make that happen is actually you've got to log on to the CASA website and tell CASA you're going to be flying a drone 5 days in advance. Then that sort of exemption is valid for 2 years. So it's a really easy process, and it's designed to kind of, make sure that CASA is regulated in the things that they deem to be high risk and keep the low risk items, relatively free from regulatory sort of bias. But the other thing is that if you own a site that you're going to be flying on, you can actually fly up to 25 kilos under the same condition. So we are seeing that, we're starting to see quarry owners and landfill owners and mine owners, or maybe not mines yet, but quarry and landfills for sure, who have been interested in drones and kind of adopting an outsourced way so far. Just go and purchase the, Propel's actually selling an M100 bundle now and get up in the air and start capturing data sort of every second or third day, and that's been really, really interesting. I mean, touch wood, so far no incidents, but obviously sort of the belief.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think last Monday your Minister of Transport was sort of obliged to open up investigations into what CAS has done. I don't think your manned flying community is particularly happy about it over there.
That's a really good point. And actually, I think the way you put that was perfect. The Minister for Transport was obliged to do that. We're actually really close with them and spent a fair bit of time on the phone early last week trying to help everybody understand what this actually means. Because I think there's a lot of miscommunication, or at least misguided direction here, where the politicians are trying to keep drones safe, and it is the previous sort of manned aviation community, and actually it's also the licensed service providers to the flying drones for living today that are objecting to it. But the main objection is that it's dangerous around airports, and frankly, like the people that disobey the rules that we all need to be concerned about, no amount of rule will, I think, actually keep them from doing what they're going to do. So I think we need to be looking at the solution from a technology perspective and education perspective, because we can set as many rules as we want to say you can't fly anything near an airport, and it doesn't stop someone turning up with a $99 drone from Kmart and getting in a plane's way. So I think we all need to be pretty pragmatic about how we can reduce risk around manned aviation, because it's damn concerning. But I'm not sure that regulating commercial operations to be more strict is actually a correct sort of correct ruling.
Well, you're in a country where you could probably come up with some ridiculous statistics for just how much of the country is nowhere near an airport or nowhere near a built-up town, or you're in a country where you could go hundreds of miles till you see the next person. So there's clearly huge amounts of land.
There's huge amounts of land. Australia is a weird place because it turns out that all the population is actually clustered around the population centres, and that's where the airports are as well. So if you looked at our spread of people who live, inside 5Ks of an airport or outside 5Ks of an airport, it's probably a higher percentage than most countries because no one lives anywhere between those population centres. But yeah, certainly there's plenty of land in Australia, and lots of our sort of primary industries depend on this industrial data being captured by drones now. So we very much want to make sure that the industry remains being safe and a world-class industry, but that our every time I get on a Qantas plane, I'm not fearing my life by a drone.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And another thing that I think kind of plays into that a little bit is, did anybody else notice that Trimble got out of the UAS game, and what do people think about that?
I think that's really interesting. I think Trimble definitely aren't out of the UAS game. I think they're just out of the hardware, and that seems like a good decision to me. I think Trimble are stronger in, Trimble's customers are, big mines and construction sites around the world where they're servicing the needs of those sites with machine control and IXC GPS and a lot of the workflow tools. I think Trimble Trimble should be looking to plug any drone into that workflow rather than just their bespoke, high-end, usually not that good drones. So I think it's a smart move. They can focus on what they're good at. They can bring multiple solutions to their resale networking customers, and I wouldn't be surprised if they become a pretty serious software player in the space.
And I see also, speaking a little bit to hand-holding, you said people are ringing you and saying, how can we make money? Drone Deploy have unveiled their sort of flight logging thing where it goes in with a few of the other apps that keep track of what your systems have done, which I think is a good idea. But at Propeller, did you expect to be holding your end users' hands quite as much as companies seemed to be doing?
Well, I mean, we've seen this pretty much from the start. There's always been people asking us, I've mucked around with it as a hobbyist and now I want to get into it seriously, blah, blah, blah. What equipment do I need? What drone should I buy? These are questions we've been asked throughout our existence. I suppose I wasn't, from an insider's perspective, I kind of feel like it's too late to be getting into it now as a commercial operator, and I'm surprised every time someone speaks to me because I feel like the wave is over, frankly, and that there's a bunch of really mature, stable operators that a business now and starting to consolidate these service providers, but that there's not a whole lot a new service provider can do to differentiate themselves, or at least have their mark on the industry. So we're kind of we like being really honest about that to these people that come to us. And I think it's not a downer for the industry at all. I just think the industry is moving at light speed, and I mean, for us at Propeller, we need to make sure that we're sort of pacing ourselves with the industries that we're trying to service, namely the industrial spaces, the dirt-related industries, and not get caught up in drone world, which is a crazy, futile place.
It is. I've got a friend in. I'm watching people go mad for the Mavic and mad for the Phantom. Oh, I've got a Phantom 4 story. I get a telephone call out of the blue from a neighbour today. We've just got a Phantom 4, and I just have to remind folks, I live in a little village in Africa. It is a little village. I live in. I can't tilt this camera up. I live in a circular hut with a thatched roof, and there are now 4. And this one's a Phantom 4. There are 4 DJI drones in this village. Anyway, so I got to fly one of those today because he bought one of those. But it was, and the race to the latest platforms, which is the Mavic, just reminds me of a friend in England, Stuart Townley, who's beginning to make quite a bit of a name for himself just using a Phantom 3 Professional. And people go mad for the equipment and seem to be forgetting the end product and the actionable data that they're after. And they can get it done, with a system which is two generations old now, which is great. And I wonder if people aren't looking at it from the wrong angle. But anyway, we've had this conversation before, haven't we, really?
I think this is a brain here.
Sorry, say again?
I think this is a common thread here. Rory being grumpy about the hardware obsession of the community and not focusing on what people are actually generating some business benefit off.
Well, we're just generally grumpy. That is what we're very good at doing. I'm going to jump on to another thing, which is a hardware related thing, which I thought was quite interesting, which is that Aeryon and their quads are offering to the police a $99 a day. There it is, your service for the aircraft, rather than buying it outright. Anybody got any thoughts about that?
Well, they're proud. They're very proud of their products over there. I've known Dave for a long time. They work. They're good, but they're really, really expensive. And I think for law enforcement, you have several issues. One of them is, someone came up with an arbitrary number. I know the gentleman for police departments to buy, drones, you shouldn't spend more than $50,000 and yada, yada, yada. But for the price point that their products are, you can buy several patrol cars. And I think they've got to find a way to bring the prices, well, let's say, appeal to more people at different price points. And it might be something where you don't need to buy a drone every day or have a drone every day or buy one or the expense, blah, blah, blah. And I think people are fishing for new markets. One other thing I wanted to add to the last topic that we were talking about, and this is what I'm telling people, or a lot of people are buying drones, and maybe one reason they're not really considering the software or taking it as serious is a lot of people, even here, are hanging their shingle out as a map maker. They're not land surveyors, they're not map makers, they're cell phone app operators. They're not inspectors, they're not bridge inspectors, they're not public or private asset management people, they're not home builders, they're not certified home inspectors. They're just people with a camera platform, and they don't really have any expertise. It's the same thing with ag. I've talked to people that are into agriculture, and they've said, really, these drone people come out here, and the way that they think about us and the crazy concepts that they have about agriculture, they're actually pretty kind of demeaning, So I tell people when they say they want to make some money, I go, do you have any experience in any fields that you can apply drones to? Because that might be the area that you want to explore. But I got off of the high-priced Canadian product, sorry. But I just wanted to add that.
but aren't a good number of you guys going to move there shortly? Anyway, not you.
I'm coming back to England.
I think you're there you go. I think you're bob on right. With if you have a skill in a niche area, then that's what you should exploit rather than try and plough a new furrow. There's an agriculture-related one. Loretta, are you still with us?
I am still with you.
That's good, because I'm wondering, in your day job teaching, and teaching law, what's the vibe at the college about 107 and everything? How you're perfectly placed to know what the up-and-coming young folks are thinking about all of this.
Well, surprisingly enough, a lot of the students don't really want to get their 107. I think they're happy operating in the margins, as it were. Most of them right now, if they're looking at careers in the drone space, are basically looking at building and flying these small models, racing. They're just not thinking of taking the test, although some of them are. But I'm actually surprised that a lot more students aren't taking the initiative, especially where I teach, where a lot of the students have their private anyway.
Yeah, well, you're an aviation place, aren't you? So I would have thought it would have been much higher on the agenda. So what's their target for a career in the future then, if the unmanned world isn't registering in it yet?
Well, most of them are in mechatronic programs, robotics. They're into building, and a lot of their flying is done. We have a hangar. A lot of the flying is done indoors because we're in New York City, and it's not the coolest place to be flying. But they're definitely totally interested in UAS, but not getting their certificates.
I would second that. My students, I do mainly television broadcast and motion picture, some communications. But I asked, just yesterday, show of hands, how many people are going to go get their 107? And only 3 or 4 people in each class put their hands up there. We like drones. I want to learn how to fly drones. They're really cool, these drones, but I don't know if I want to pursue this as a career.
And does it look like a career in Australia at the moment, Rory? Oh, I forgot he's got to mute his bike. He's got to get off the bike, isn't he? Oh, you're off the bike. Sorry. Does this look like does being an RPA driver look like a career in Australia?
I wouldn't say so. I'd say there's a few people that think into it long term. There'd be sort of big groups of them, service providers, but mostly, as we've just talked about, it's the environmental engineers, it's the quarry and mining consultants or mining engineers or surveyors that are actually sort of equipped with all the other skills you need that are going to continue flying drones commercially. That would be my take on it.
Yeah, my take is that it's very similar, that it's probably going to be one of the shortest lived aviation career paths in aviation's 100 and whatever year history, because as we've already said, the things are becoming increasingly autonomous. I'd almost guarantee within 5 years they're going to weigh less than a kilo with much better sensors. They're going to do everything for themselves, and you won't need any sort of certification to model a building or do the quarry or anything like that. So I also think it's a short-lived career. And in South Africa, it's so expensive to get your it's about $8,000 or $9,000 in total, and it just doesn't make any economic sense, really. It just doesn't. Not enough jobs here for it. So it's a very interesting time. So people are building this technology, and DJI and the others are moving forward with it, but you sort of wonder are we soon going to hit a point where it doesn't need to be any smarter? I can't think of an analogy. A Formula One racing car and just a cheap little Mini or something. They both do the same thing.
I think everybody has the tendency to try and normalize to industries where we know that technology improvement has stagnated, but I think it's often the case that it just doesn't. It'll just keep going. It'll keep getting better. I don't know. Mobile iPhones were good a few generations ago, and they're much better now, I would say.
Yeah, true. Fair point. Sorry, Patrick, we're going to jump in then.
No, you guys you're covering it all.
So what are the
I think
scandals?
this might get so good that we could just have like a half hour of silence, just announce ourselves. like the iPhone model. God, those guys are good. And gals.
Isn't the next one going to be clear or something like that? So has anything else come your way in Silicon Valley this week, Patrick, that's going to shock and astound us?
I don't know if it's going to be shocking and astounding. I'm going to present on our behalf the SUS News at this Drone Masters thing, which some guys have come over here from Germany. It ought to be interesting to see what they have to say. The rules in Germany are really interesting. The rules in France are really interesting. I have noticed that the people in Europe now are like, oh, wait a minute. The rules are so liberal in the United States that now we're going to fall behind after enjoying let's say, a liberal path to flying legally for all these years and all of this groundbreaking information that we've gotten and how to operate, how to make money. And now all of a sudden the Americans flick the switch and we're going to be riding in the back seat. I don't know, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if it's not. I'm interested to, I haven't been to Europe in a couple of years, so I'm interested to see what these people have to say.
Well, I think
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Patrick, I was going to say that the trouble there is that actually, if you talk mainland Europe, they didn't really have regulations, and that's why they think it was so easy, because they weren't following any rules. But the UK got in not too long after Australia with the rules, and you're probably hearing about this proposed European regulations that keep Craig's just such a busy man, he can't get on, unfortunately. But he's the man that's been in Parliament in the UK trying to argue against some pretty draconian proposed European rules. And even though the UK is leaving Europe, Brexit, apparently, that's not going to save them from EASA rules that we're still signatories to over there. So that's what they're all jumping up and down about. And really, another way of looking at it, and Craig would correct me if I'm wrong, is that a lot of the countries that dragged their heels in Europe and didn't rush to do it, they've allowed this void or gap or vacuum to occur. And so these crazy regulations are rushing in to fill that vacuum, and that's a pity. But we'll see. We'll see how it pans out. I can't believe it's going to be allowed to happen. Just because there are crazy regs, but yeah, America does have simple regs now. But then again, we could say Australia has even better regs. After, what was it? Rory said up to 55. No,
No, you're saying no. There's just it's like that life of Brian deal with the leper. There's just no pleas at some people. No, I'm kidding.
Yes, yeah, my juniper wishes. Yes.
Yeah, no,
micro UAS rule, because it really has an impact on a lot of people, like students and teachers. I think that our rules are great for commercial operators, but they're really much too much for hobbyists and for schools and teachers. So I do think we have to follow Australia's lead.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. And I mean, even that, that for years coming out of the ARC, I mean, I tried to champion an under 4 pound exemption and 4 pounds instead of 2 kilos to try and lock AeroVironment out. But, and a lot of stuff that was in the NPRM and even given to EASA and, working with the Europeans on an exemption for under 4 pounds where you wouldn't need a license and you could go and do limited operations 400 feet, 1,500 feet laterally. RCAPA championed that for years, and we could never get anyone to buy off on it because people said it wasn't enough weight for them. They wanted to do X, Y, and Z, yada, yada, yada. But I think that's what's really needed for schools, universities, something where they can fly something small weight in a limited envelope and, use them to learn. Not everyone that flies a drone wants to be in the drone business.
Yeah, for sure. Now, the rest of on the Book of the Face, people are talking about Part 101 and Part 107 yet again, and FPV. And I just threw my oar in there. What would the benefit of operating or flying first-person view under Part 107 be? I'm a bit confused with all that.
Okay, well, under 101, you can't fly FPV because you have to be visual line of sight. So under 107, if you have a visual observer, you can fly FPV. Of course, the problem is that you have to be 16 to get your license. So anyone under 16 would not only have to have a visual observer, but they'd have to have a PIC. So you could be the manipulator of the controls under 16, but then you'd have to have a PIC and a VO. So, I think it's ridiculous for the weight that most people are drone racing and the sort of closed track that they're using to require a 107 certificate for that is totally overkill.
Let me ask you, because I had this conversation, this was another conversation this morning. Now they're going to have those races over there in Hawaii like this week. And, they're the people that are racing are not 107. And I think I agree with you, Loretta, it's pretty clear cut. You're like 107 guy, but you don't see the FAA is not marching over there and saying, hey, you can't do this, or hey, wait a minute, this doesn't go with our regs. Do you think that's and this is just a total opinion thing, good thing or bad thing? Should they say, hey, we have these rules, this isn't the rule, or just let it go? What do you think?
Well, I think they should change the rule. I don't think it's fair to have a regulatory regime and people are kind of left in the dark. Am I supposed to comply? Am I not supposed to comply? I mean, the rule is there. The FAA came out with a statement that FPV had to be under 107. So I'm glad they're not enforcing it because I think it's ridiculous. But I think that they need to either come out with an exemption, and I don't mean everybody has to go file something. I mean something that says, if you're drone racing and you're in a closed court and you've got, whatever they think is appropriate for that sort of use. But I think the idea of having rules, but you don't have to comply with them, is just very confusing to the public. And the FAA has a history of turning around and saying, okay, we didn't enforce them for 10 years, 20 years, whatever, and now we're going to. So
exactly.
I don't
Does
think
it really? So can you name an example of where they've done some? Sorry, that's putting you on the spot a bit, Loretta, but is there a really good known example where they've sort of turned the other way and then gone for it after a while?
Guys, I've got to run off. Sorry, great to chat today.
Okay, Rory.
Adios.
Okay, take care. Cheers, boy. Look after yourself.
Thanks, bye.
Cheers.
Well, I mean, right before I retired, the FAA had this focus on operational control, and for years they had allowed air carriers to basically rent out their certificates and didn't do anything about it. Then they had this focus on people not being allowed to do that, and there were some pretty big penalties meted out, including emergency revocation, a $10 million penalty, and apparently they're now back to not caring about operational control. So a lot of the airlines, when we were prosecuting them, were saying, well, the FAA inspector told us we could do it like this. And it's like, well, nobody cares what the inspectors say in terms of, mitigating a penalty. So that's my concern with the rules saying one thing, the FAA doing another, and the public left to kind of, well, I'm going to take this risk, and it's just not fair. And I'm on the side of the FAA changing their interpretation and changing their rule.
I
Well, and
suppose. Sorry, I'll go quickly. I suppose, heaven forbid, there was an incident or accident at the Drone Worlds, and somebody was fairly seriously injured, or anywhere else where they race. That might force the FAA's hand into a decision, might it, Loretta?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, they don't call it the Tombstone Agency for nothing. I mean,
The tombs. What does that mean? The Tombstone Agency.
well,
whistling
basically,
past the. Go ahead.
right,
I'm
somebody
sorry.
die and then they take action. So that unfortunately is very true, that if somebody were significantly injured or killed, all of a sudden there would be this rush to prosecute the person under 107. And that's what I think is not fair to people, to be in this kind of limbo.
Well, that, and to go one further on that, it's like, look, we, and I think Rory kind of alluded to it, education and rules. And, early on, even in the ARC, I was like, you guys can come up with any regulation you want. But, enforcement's going to be the third leg of the chair. So if you go and you turn a blind eye to this, I mean, you can do whatever you want, you meaning the FAA, they can do whatever they want, but you start turning blind eyes or giving mixed signals, then you get those guys, oh, well, I can fly under 100 feet. Oh, I can fly for money because the FPV guys do it, and I use FPV, and I'm going to, they can win money, and I'm going to do money. So I think it breeds a culture of question. And then nobody knows exactly what's going on, and then they tell two friends, and they tell two friends, and before you know it, on the face of the book, there's people in there going, oh, yeah, you can do X, Y, and Z. I've witnessed it for the last 10 years. So I think that's what the danger is. If you want to have your rule, FAA, have your rule, but that's it. And you know what? Yeah, we made a mistake. We got to go back and change it or whatever. But I think leaving it open-ended is just counterproductive.
Right, and it leads to exactly what you said, a culture of noncompliance. I mean, the rules are the minimum standards. So if you create a situation where you don't have to comply with the minimum standards, well, what other minimum standards don't you have to comply with? So I believe, as we discussed, that the rule makes no sense, and as Patrick says, change the rule. But you don't want to encourage people that for years have been kind of in the Wild West to continue sort of, well, we make it up as we go along, or we don't like the rule, we don't comply with it.
Yeah, that's not a nation of laws. That's, so that's, I think, what we had talked earlier, the rules came out, I think they're very liberal. I agree. This is the minimum, they should support their own work. I think that would be the ultimate. And that was another. I mean, I don't think the FAA has gotten a ton of praise from people about the rule. I think it's a lot better than we thought was going to come. So let's work together with the regulator and row the Waka of excellence together.
The walks of excellence. So they're in an old people's home or something.
Well, what, the Waka? No, it's a canoe. I guess you did.
I thought you said a walker.
No, the Waka.
The FAA is supposed to be changing their 336 interpretation. So they could, although I've heard they're going the other way, but they could say that FPV with a visual observer is fine, that drone racing does not constitute commercial activity. Drone racing for, a purse does not constitute commercial activity, and
I suppose, though, things like, people like ESPN and all the other people that are bringing this on board then make it a much bigger event, a bolder event, and safety has to be a concern at stuff like that. So if the FAA are seeing people racing in televised extravaganzas, they might hope that there'll be a higher standard of safety at that sort of event. What I'm trying to say, and say badly, is it kind of makes it more commercial and more important to be safe. Did that make any sense?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, people, and I don't know how it works in other countries, but we'll just, here, people emulate what they see on TV and the YouTube, And oh, hey, I saw. I mean, some of those. I mean, the flying that some of the racers do is pretty dang impressive. I mean, I've seen these guys do freestyle stuff that almost looks like it kind of defies physics. Okay,
Yeah.
so you know, if you're in the business of selling that and you're promoting this sport, you're like any other, you know, Honda might do with their motorcycles or whatever. You know, so you go out and you buy this and you're emulating whoever you saw on the racetrack or doing the freestyle or whatever else. That's, you know, you want to be good like, you know, Mike or whoever. And I think that's kind of some of the drive behind the popularity in these sports. That's what I think. So you're going to have to be safe. You're going to have to, that's another thing is, you know, you have all these drone racing groups. There's several different ones. Is there any real rules? Is this, you know, I don't know what's going on there. I don't think they know what's going on there. I think they need to sit down and write standards. I think they need to get it together as professional organizations. And then they could even maybe at that point go to the FAA. And I've said this, you know, if you wrote your own standards, came up with your own safety regime that was all written down, and we have all these rules, and we're going to go to the FAA and say, hey, we want you to change the 336 interpretation and use the set of standards that we've come up with internationally, yada, yada, yada. I think it would hold a little bit more weight than, hey, the FPV racing is cool.
Well,
Anybody else want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I went to the Drone Nationals at Governor's Island, and I thought that the way they ran it looked pretty safe to me. I mean, they had nets between the participants and the racing. I thought it was pretty unlikely that a drone would have gone. I mean, you know, something crazy could have happened, but, you know, really, you know, compared to, you know, air shows, it's certainly much safer than that.
I'd concur with that. I saw some of the pictures of the carnage of the accident up here at Reno, and it was ugly.
So I do think that the risk, and a lot of these drones are pretty small that they use for racing. I mean, I don't know how much they weigh, but they're smaller than my Phantoms.
Oh yeah. Well, I must say, from the only racing I got really close to was at Farnborough, and well, there we are. That says in itself, it was at Farnborough. There were 75,000 people there, but those guys were I thought they were super professional, and but outwardly all the racers were the crazy young hooligans, but really in the background all the guys were jolly safe. You know, they were sorting it all out. So I was very impressed with that.
I don't think it's my point with that is I don't think it would be hard for them to come together, you know, as a new sport. I think it's really low hanging fruit, especially when you compare it to, say, like a regular air show like up here at Reno. I don't think it would take that much work. I think that the FPV people, you know, even during the small UAS ARC, that whole 550 thing, you know, that the AMA 550 document for the FPV kind of came out of the ARC thing at the last minute. We tried to put some deal together so FPV would have some legal territory to operate in. And I just think that they've always kind of pushed it off to the side. It's kind of been in the shadows, and now it's just time to roll up the sleeves, write some stuff down, and, you know, pull the long pants on with it. I don't think it would be that hard. And I think they'd get a lot of credibility from both the regulator and the community and other folks involved like ESPN and whatnot.
And I think we've got to get on Loretta's team and get behind Loretta's campaign to get those rules changed, and then get the rule changed. Do both though, isn't it? It's a do both thing. You get the rules changed and you present the FAA with, and that's part of the changing, isn't it? Is presenting the FAA with the standard operating procedures and the safety record, and get it changed and keep moving that way. I'm sure it'll happen.
Well, I think
short of changing the rule, they could just change the 336 interpretation, because changing the rule takes forever. So just change the interpretation of visual line of sight.
Right.
Yeah.
And I still, beating on that drum, it's going to be much easier for someone to get them to change that interpretation with something that's written down on paper instead of something that could change, So
Well, maybe we need
that's
to.
my advice. Do yourself a favor, write some stuff down, go to them, and maybe, talk to somebody like Loretta on how you would approach them to get them to change the interpretation.
Well, you know the people, Patrick and Loretta, you know them. We should get them on here and say, well, what are you doing? And I'm sure they'd come and tell us, and we'd be surprised. I'm sure there's lots of going on. I'm sure they're much like swans, graceful above and paddling like Billy O below. I see the hour is come and gone just about, so we better wind this up. Thanks very much again for joining us on this Tuesday evening chat, or afternoon for you guys. We'll look out for more stuff that arrives on the radar next week and see what we can argue about once more. So Loretta, very good afternoon to you, and good afternoon to you, Patrick.
Okay.
Good afternoon to you.
Night.
Cheers.
Ciao.
Is that too polite for you, Patrick? Good afternoon.
All right. Yes, good afternoon, and until next week.
All right, mate. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers.